Good afternoon, Washington, D.C. This is Tony Browder here for another edition of the Browder Files Show. We do our best to bring you news and information that's practical, that's useful, information that would transform the quality of your life. And today's show is no different. I have the distinct honor and pleasure this afternoon to have as my special guest Dr. Michael V. Roberts, who is a businessman. He's an entrepreneur. He is involved in numerous enterprises that have favorably impacted his community. And he's here today to talk to us about his life, about his business practices, his business philosophy, and how you can make the quality of your life better here in the United States of America while simultaneously holding on to your family, building your family stronger, and developing your community. Mike was born in St. Louis. He's has built an empire of more than 100 companies spanning real estate, media, aviation, and technology. He's taken many of his companies public. He's founded the television and radio stations. But his greatest legacy, the greatest thing that he has built is his relationship with his children, who all are attorneys, who all are involved in his business. And as Michael said in one of the documents I reviewed for this show, his children have the pleasure of following in their father's footsteps, and they have only worked for themselves. So that's a legacy that I'm sure you're proud of. So, Michael, welcome to the Browder Files Show. How are you doing, my brother?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. Thank you. You're looking good, brother. And let me first say to everybody who's watching and listening that it's really my honor to be recognized by you, who we all consider to be a true icon in our community, one who's preserved our African American history, especially from a perspective of the contributions that our African brothers and sisters in Egypt has provided for this country and us as individuals. So it's really an honor for me to be here today, and I look forward to a robust interview. Thank you very much.
Well, you're quite welcome, Michael. And, um, you know, one of the things that has motivated me to do the work that I do is growing up not knowing my father. And as I became older, family grew more important to me. And so, as a man, as a father, as a grandfather now, I'm really interested in developing legacy that I can pass down to my children. And I see that you have done just that. You are a perfect example of how of a self-made man and someone who values family, values businesses, and has instilled these values into your children. So I remember reading in your bio that one of your first businesses was selling dashikis.
Yeah,
Tell,
yeah.
tell us about that and what prompted your interest in business and your
Well,
decision to create your own enterprises.
well, that's an interesting story. A lot of people wonder, well, what is the spark that generates one's thoughts in as an entrepreneur and a capitalist, uh, and being a capitalist with a social mindset that means contributing back to the community with the opportunities that you've created for yourself financially. It sort of started this interesting story. My dad had me to cut the grass. We had finally bought a gas lawnmower, and my job was to cut the grass, which was the duty of in the household. You had to have duties.
Mm-hmm.
But I was given $5, whatever I would cut the grass. Uh, but interestingly enough, my neighbors thought I did a pretty good job, so I actually would cut the neighbors on both sides, but they would pay $10. And something triggered, even at the age of 12 or 13, that one was a job and the other was a business.
Mm-hmm.
And so from that point forward, there must have been some spark that said it's better for you to build and grow and develop businesses as compared to perhaps having a job and somebody else signing your paycheck. And
Hmm.
that's one of the things that I've instilled in my children. I've had summer jobs when I was in school, of course, grocery stores and freighting docks and things like that, working my way through college and law school. Um, but I realized that, that's a means to an end and not the end. And so once I finished law school, once I, 1 week after I graduated, uh, I moved 2 blocks from the projects in the city where I lived for 10 years. And still in my 20s, within 2 years, I was elected to the city council, the Board of Aldermen, we called it. And I was the youngest member to have ever been elected to the Board of Aldermen.
What prompted you to run for that position, Mike?
Well, it was an interest. I've always been a person who's given back and been politically intrigued. Uh, I helped campaigns when I was in college. Uh, I ran for political school offer. I was on the the Student Bar Association council in law school. I was on the vice president of the student body in college. So uh, even though my dad worked at the post office for 39 years and my mom taught uh, part-time, we had a family that was committed to work and to being committed also to our community.
Hmm.
I can remember when my mother would take me and we would stuffing political envelopes as a kid, and I didn't really realize what was going on, to be honest with you. Uh, but it was something that I did, and it was ingrained in me.
Hmm.
My parents were not entrepreneurs. Well, they were to a degree, I should say. They were not political people. They weren't running for office. They were just good people.
Hmm.
My dad, when he was at the served at the post office, he was elevated to become a superintendent. So he was a guy who had motivation within the ranks that he existed. When he was in college, he was the charter member of my fraternity, Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity. He was the charter member, meaning he and his fellow brothers started the chapter in St. Louis back in 1942.
Hmm.
And I will add that, Dad was born in 1922 and he passed in 2022. So you could do the math.
Sure.
But he was always the guy that was there for me and for my brothers. I have two brothers and a sister. I'm the oldest. And, the values that were installed, the work ethic, the commitment to the community was something that was prevalent in my household.
So
Um,
you grew up in St. Louis, correct?
yes.
Where are your family from originally? I assume they were part of the Great Migration.
Well, yes, of course. I'll take you back. No, my dad and mom were St. Louis born.
Okay.
My dad's dad was from West Point, Mississippi.
Hmm. Hmm.
The late 1800s, he was born, uh, and he went on to Lane and then to Meharry Medical School.
Okay.
So he found himself in St. Louis, uh, and it's an interesting backdrop on this. Uh, we didn't really have connections with West Point because there were no cell phones or phones back in back in the turn of the century, back in those
Hmm.
days. Um, I was active in Jimmy Carter's campaign. In fact, I ran his campaign for him in the eastern part of Missouri, and they appointed me to be on the Tennessee-Tombigbee Waterway Project. It was the development of the waterway project through Mississippi. And while I was back and
Mm.
forth, I had a chance to go and visit West Point, Mississippi. Uh, and I said, well, I'm going to go over there. And of course, Roots had just come out. So I was trying to go see if we had 40 acres and a mule sitting out there. Whether or not white folks had already taken the land that we had.
For sure.
So I was there and I looked it up. In the end, I couldn't find anything at that time. Uh, and I noticed that the clerk was on the phone while I was in there. They were probably wondering, well, who is this young black guy in a seersucker suit trying to find out what's going on with black ownership. But as I was leaving, he stopped me and he said, "Can I help you? What were you really?" I said, "I was really looking to find my family roots, to be honest with you." And he said, "Well, let me suggest you go and look at the census tract that was taking place for the public schools, where they would count the students and name them." And I went into a room. There was a huge book, and in it had colored students, colored and white.
Mm-hmm.
Started going back in time, and in 1902, I found my grandfather.
There you go.
And I also found that he had a couple of sisters, and uh, and we saw some other Robertses that may have been related.
Mm-hmm.
And then fast forward, I ended up over at Morehouse. Uh, I'm sorry, not at Morehouse, but at Meharry when and looked up the medical history. I mean the
Mm-hmm.
history, and I found him. He graduated in '09.
Mm. So what was it like for you, man? What did you feel when you found your grandfather's name in that first ledger?
I reached out to my dad. I said, "Dad, I found your father." Who, by the way, my dad's lost his dad when he was about 14 or 15,
Okay.
16.
Mm-hmm.
So he grew up with him, but didn't have him all the way through. Uh, and I brought it back and I said, "Well, did you know of this? There was a Viola Roberts. Did you?" He said, "Yeah, I had heard that name before." Of course, no connection. Well, this is just a quick story. I have to tell you this story. So my brother and I, Steve and I, go into Jackson, Mississippi. We buy a hotel. We buy and build a television station.
All right, hold on one second. You just dropped that
But
gem.
I dropped it for a
You,
purpose.
okay. I hope you're going to come back
Yeah,
to
let me
you
finish.
and your brother buying a hotel. All
Oh
right.
yeah, yeah. Well, we ultimately own 12 hotels.
Okay. Only. Okay.
Yeah, owned and managed our own hotels.
Mm-hmm.
So we were buying different things. We'll have to back up and go through that evolution in a moment. But uh, my point is, once we hit a city, because by this time Steve was also elected after law school. My brother Steve, and was elected to the board of aldermen. So the two of us were kind of running the city for a while. We along with a few other brothers created a
Mm-hmm.
black organization of councilmen and as a group we would be in a great position to deal with our own gerrymandering at that time.
Mm.
We were protecting the wards for black folks. Back to Jackson, Mississippi for a second. And so when you go into a city, you get your political visa in order. You talk to the mayor, well, there was one brother who was apparently the wealthy brother in Jackson, and he had a brother who was active with him, who worked for him, who was involved with economic development. So Steve is sitting there, and we're having a conversation with him, and we said, "Well, we have links here to Mississippi, West Point." Well, the guy next to the wealthy guy, his employee, says, "Really, I'm from West Point." And we said, "Oh, okay, well, our grandfather was from there. His name was Squire Victor Roberts." So he goes, "You mean Dr. Roberts?" I said, "Yes." Hold on. My grandmother is Viola Roberts. You remember I had said that we found
Yes, you
a
did.
Viola
Mm-hmm.
that was his
Mm-hmm.
sister? We're sitting 100 years later. We're sitting across from our second cousin. His dad and my dad are first cousins.
Okay.
First cousins.
Small world.
100 years later. There's
Absolutely.
a few of those stories that I've run across, by the way, that brings us all together. So yes,
Mm-hmm.
West Point, and his father was Wright Roberts before that, and they were people who owned their own farms uh, in Mississippi back then.
So let me ask you a question then, Mike, based on that story. I'm a person who subscribes to the belief that certain traits, certain qualities run in families. They're like a genetic inheritance. And so it appears to me that this sense of entrepreneurship is something that was passed down from generation to generation along your family line. So you're meeting with the person who turned out to be a cousin of yours who was also a businessman. speaks to the fact that that's something that success does run in your family, right?
I think that's fair to say. I mean, it's not absolute, of course,
Mm-hmm.
but uh, there is a genetic comparison, I would think, uh,
Mm-hmm.
that leads to uh, what I would call otherwise sort of an instinct to be able to identify opportunities and pursue them, uh,
Mm-hmm.
courage with confidence. You know, in my book, Action Has No Season, I coined a word, the actionaire.
Mm-hmm.
And the actionaire is one who takes their ideas, their dreams, their sense of purpose, and pursue them with this courage and confidence and bravado. Uh, because I'm a firm believer in the 86,400 seconds that we're given every day, Anthony, that every moment you either use it or you lose it. Every
Mm-hmm.
so you need to embrace those moments and cherish them because that's all
Yeah,
you
they are special, and you'll never get them back. Well, let me ask you this, Mike. You mentioned the name of your book, Action Has No Season. I'd like for you to talk a minute about the subtitle of that book, Secrets to Gaining Wealth and Authority. So,
yes,
authority is as important as wealth is in this combination that leads to success. Authority in what? What type of authority are you talking about?
sure. Well, first of all, let's make a distinction between being rich and being wealthy.
Okay.
Okay? I've always said rich people scream, but wealthy people whisper. Wealth is usually considered something to sustain for your family and allow it to be passed on. Whereas people who are rich, who function with the bling bling, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
tend to blow it and they aren't planning to be able to create a sustainable migration of wealth to the next generation. As it relates to authority, we'll compare authority with power for the moment. And I think a great example that I've used many times is when President Bush and Condoleezza Rice went to India and they spoke to the heads of India and the heads of Pakistan to tell them not to start a war because it would create, a disruption that is may have nuclear impact. Uh, they basically thumbed their nose at that. They meaning the heads of those two countries.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're talking about the president of the United States, who's theoretically the most powerful person on the face of the earth. Power, using that term. Now, when Michael Dell goes over there and says, if you start a war and impact the the flow of my computers out of your country, I will pull my equipment, my machines, my company out of your country and affect the growth of your middle class. Michael Dell had authority, Bush had power.
Okay.
Which would you rather have?
Mm-hmm. Perfect example.
Yes.
Perfect example. So, what type of authority have you accumulated as a Black man, and what type of authority do Black people need to develop in order to achieve success, wealth, and power?
Well, again, I think authority is a formation of who you are and what you are. Uh, and for others to respect your position or your level of success. Uh, so if we're going to have authority, we as Black folks, if we're going to have authority, we're going to have to realize that it's not a debatable issue. Is that person successful, capable, and so on and so forth? To some degree, authority is a reflection of what others see on you.
Mm-hmm.
That you're granted authority as a result of your behavior and who you are, uh, and your level of success, if you will. So I think that in order for us to be philosophically people with authority, we have to recognize that a a structure within our Black community, an ability to to have sustainability is something that works best for us, as I see it.
Okay. Let me just remind my guests that you're listening to the Browder File Show here on WPFW. And my guest today is Michael Roberts, who is it fair to call you an entrepreneur, a millionaire, multimillionaire? How would you like for me to refer to you, Mike?
As your brother.
As my brother. All right. Well,
Now, if you want to talk about my value in terms of my wealth and all that, that's CNN once quoted in an article a story about my brother and I and said that we had built $1 billion worth of assets. Assets can be sustained and assets can be lost.
absolutely.
So the question becomes, what is your lifestyle?
Hmm.
I live a comfortable lifestyle. Uh, I have the opportunity to pretty much go where I want to go and do what I want to do. Uh, and so I just think it's appropriate for you to use. I know we use terms like multimillionaire, billionaire, and all that. And there's no pockets and shrouds.
Hmm. Well, I do.
I mean, so when we leave this earth, whatever you might be calling me, we all going to end up as dust. And
Oh,
so the best thing to do is make sure that our children, our children's children, have the opportunity to live a quality life.
as a colleague of mine said just recently, I've never seen a U-Haul behind a hearse. You can't take it with you, right? And what's so critically important is that you have stated numerous times throughout this interview how important it is to leave something behind for your children and your descendants. That's the real measure of a man. That's the real measure of success in my eyes. For me, what I want to leave behind is knowledge of self, history, and culture. You obviously have an appreciation for history, culture, knowledge of self, but you also have built um, businesses that will sustain you and your family for generations. But also, I assume, and let me know if this is an inaccurate assumption, but you also are intent on hiring your own people and demonstrating to those who work for you specific values that you want them to incorporate in their lives. Am I mistaken with that?
Anthony, in the hundreds of businesses that I've built, I've employed over all of these nearly 50 years, uh, approximately 11,000 people.
Mm.
99% were black.
Hmm.
99% were black. Okay.
Okay.
So whenever I would buy and open up a TV station, of which I owned about 12 at one time, or all these hotels, uh, whenever people would say, well, it's hard to find somebody black to manage the hotel or to run the TV station. Funny, I didn't have that problem. You know, white folks seem to have a problem finding black folks to do
Mm.
these things, but I certainly didn't have a problem. So I'm a firm believer that in reality, those of us who have the capability to hire and 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 expose our folks and their children to success stories out of our community, out of the black community, that we have sort of an obligation to do that.
Okay. You just answered the question that I was going to ask you. You mentioned those who have the capability. It's also important to have the responsibility and the consciousness to want to hire your own, to want to build within your community for the sake of building your community. And I would assume that the desire for doing that was instilled in you early in life by your parents and also through your interest in politics. Is that a fair assessment again?
It is. But you remember, I came up in the 60s and the 70s. So
Yeah.
I mean, I was organizing in college, Black College Union, and we were boycotting and taking over libraries. And
Hmm.
when a lot of my friends may have been burning flags, I was running for political office within the school ranks. So we were together, but I was taking a different route of demonstrating, our position. and that is taking a position where my voice could be heard uh, in a different way. Now, I
Sure.
had my share of protests, don't get me wrong, uh, but even to the point that I was successful, when Kwame Ture came to St. Louis for a fundraiser before he was going to leave to go home to transition, I had a fundraiser at a restaurant I own and at my personal home. I did that with the Nation of Islam. We did that together. I've always been close to the minister.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we raised more money at my home than was raised when they left to go to DC for this big gala. But it really didn't raise any money. It cost too much. But I'll tell you one interesting, when I was standing introducing to the folks who were there to contribute at my home, I stood next to him. He was in a wheelchair.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and Akbar Muhammad and I hosted this together. And so I looked at everyone and I said, now you're probably wondering why a capitalist like me is here helping a socialist like him. And I said, and the reason is because if it wasn't for him doing what he did, I wouldn't be where I am and have what I have. So therefore, I have an obligation to help this brother as much as we can to continue to move his life in a comfortable way.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody really appreciated that statement because
Absolutely.
it was real to me.
Absolutely. Yeah, I do recall when Kwame Ture came to DC to have his fundraiser. And you're right, it's good to host things in DC, but it costs an arm and a leg. And sometimes you spend more money, you invest more money in organizing an event than you raise at the event. So you have to be extremely strategic in terms of how you move in that environment. You mentioned a couple of times about capitalism. Capitalism. The United States of America is probably the capital of capitalism. How important is it to understand or cultivate a meaningful relationship with money, a meaningful relationship to capital in
Mhm.
order to live in this country or live in the world? How important is that, Michael?
Well, okay. We're in the United States. If we were a socialist nation, we'd be called socialist. If we were a communist nation, we'd be called communist. We're in a capitalist nation. So therefore, that's what we are. Now, too often, many of my brothers and sisters, downplay and have a negative position of capitalism, which I understand because it appears to have nothing but exploitation connected to it. My position is simple. I can do more with money than being broke. And if I'm in a system that I have to learn, understand, and then create my own social consciousness, then that is what one should do and recognize the value of being an entrepreneur, which means you're a capitalist in a capitalist society. Now, we as Black folks have a tendency sometimes to find excuses to not uh, be competitive in business for whatever reason. Uh, and therefore, we find ourselves, having jobs. I go to Atlanta, for example, and everybody talks about that being the mecca for Black folks, and and I'm asking the question often, well, what do we own here?
Mm-hmm.
In Um, I owned 3 city blocks in downtown St. Louis at one point. And when I went to Atlanta, I was the only Black hotel owner in Atlanta at the time. Now my portrait hangs in Morehouse in the Hall of Fame at the Martin Luther King Chapel because they plucked me out of St. Louis and put me over there. But I am a Morehouse dad. My son did go to Morehouse.
Mm-hmm.
But my point is, we have a little confusion sometimes about if you say it's the Mecca, then let's talk about all the things we own, not all the good jobs that we have.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was interesting because I've lived here in DC for 53 years now. And what struck me coming to DC from Chicago, living in a segregated community where I was surrounded by Black folk, I had Black doctors, Black dentists, I've seen Black business people. And when I came to DC, which was on the verge of becoming Chocolate City, I saw Black folk who were content to get that good government job and
Right.
do their 30 and 40 years and be satisfied. And what I noticed was, from my point of view, I had an entrepreneurial spirit, and I saw what other entrepreneurs who moved to DC were doing. And it appeared as though everyone who came from outside of DC were doing much better than people who lived in DC because they had a different mindset. You talked about being an entrepreneur. There is a term that has gathered more interest over the years, and that is a social entrepreneur. So it's someone who understands your value and your connection to the community and uses their resources and uses their time to enhance their community as they're enhancing themselves and their businesses. And you certainly have done that. That's been a part of your life. What advice would you give to a young person who is just beginning their career?
Well, I would first say that maximize your education.
Hmm.
As I've moved all of my kids, I've asked them to choose what they want to do, but I set the example of having a legal background to be competitive in the business world, because you need to know about tax considerations and the law and how to read a business plan and interpret it through the eyes of a lawyer as well as through the eyes of an entrepreneur. I just want more of us to realize that what has in the past been stupid ideas have turned out to be multi-billion-dollar opportunities. For example, something you remember back when years ago there was something called the pet rock?
Yes, I do.
Now,
Absolutely.
how stupid is that? And yet
Hmm.
they made hundreds of millions of dollars doing it.
Is that because there's a sucker born every minute, or someone just had a good
No,
idea and knew how to market it?
I'm just saying that look, it's like some guys decided that they were going to rent out their couch for people coming to town, and next thing you know, you have a $75 billion company called Airbnb.
Mm.
It sounded stupid that people are going to come and stay at your house,
Hmm.
strangers. Doesn't that sound crazy? Back then, of course it did. Today, it's standard. Or if you look at what we're doing now, you see historically, there back in the day there used to be a kind of a phone video process before Zoom existed, and now here we are with Zoom. Who
Hmm.
It sounded stupid to think that we'd be able to sit here and look at each other and have this type of conversation across, the Atlantic in this case, and the Caribbean, and where I am and where you are in DC. That sounded stupid, but no, now it's also a multi-billion-dollar business. Or, the guys that said, you know what, let's create uh, our own school yearbook, but let's do it on a video screen. It
Hmm.
became Facebook, now Meta. Those are stupid ideas back then. My point is, don't allow your idea that may not seem credible or marketable, because the time may come when it becomes exactly what you need. I'd like for us to spend a moment, for example, talking about futuristic businesses and
Okay.
making sure that we are taking our community in the right direction.
Well, before you do that, Michael, let me reintroduce you to our audience. In the event that someone tuned in late, I want to remind you that you're listening to WPFW. This is the Browder Files Show, and my guest is businessman extraordinaire Michael Roberts, who's talking about secrets to gaining wealth and authority. So continue, Michael, please.
Public education started in 1900, and it was created to have an enlightened workforce for the emerging industrial age.
Hmm.
As I speak at HBCUs, I find that frequently the curriculum being taught at our HBCUs are the same curriculum that was taught 125 years ago.
Absolutely.
You know, and yet, what is it going to be like 10 years from now, 5 years from now in this society? And are our schools preparing our K through 12s and our college students to understand that we are in the middle of a digital age. Everything is changing as a result of quantum computing. There'll be more knowledge available to the human than ever in the history. In fact, you could take all the knowledge that humans have had from the origin of man to now, and then in the next 10 years, we will have more data, more knowledge than in all that history as a human.
Mhm. And we'll carry all of that knowledge in a device like a phone, a cell phone.
Precisely.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about that. So what you just showed was a an opportunity to have infinite knowledge right in your hand. Okay.
Hmm.
But that's fundamentally a chip. So as I'm a futurist, and that's why I have so many businesses. When I started a wireless phone company when we were still on analog phones. Digital was coming. I knew it. I envisioned it, and I jumped into that business, and I ultimately sold it for $400 million. Those kinds of visions and views to the future is what makes the difference in today's world. So let's be. Let me take the audience for a moment on a little trip that may be a little disruptive, and I'm doing it on purpose. Uh, that chip that's in the phone, imagine in the future that that chip is in your brain,
Mm-hmm.
and singularity exists at that point where suddenly you can close your eyes and see yourself skydiving, or you can put a lens on your eye and you're scuba diving.
Mm-hmm.
You have infinite knowledge. You can quote the Bible if you wish.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah, you know, these instruments can speak in over 150 different languages and interpret and understand it. So, what's going to happen in the future when that becomes a part of you, or your robot who's standing behind you, being able to give you the information that you need, which is what your phone is doing? Your phone is nothing but a robot, basically, is what I would
Okay.
say. Uh, and so one day your folks will be able to look in the mirror, which will have all these little chips, and you're not gonna feel too well, so you'll say, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, what's wrong with me?" And the data that will be gathered from that will be sent to RoboDoc. Your RoboDoc will do the evaluation. Your RoboDoc will send it to RoboPharmacist. The RoboPharmacist will pull the prescription. It'll then call in the drone, the flying robo drone, which will bring your medicine to you. It'll be handed to you, you'll consume it, and then you'll feel better. What have I just done? I just eliminated doctors, pharmacists, transporting people, taxis, and things along that line.
Mm-hmm.
In the future, as a result of cryptocurrency and the blockchain, you can be in DC, I could be in Singapore. We can make a decision that you're going to buy some property from me, and we're going to do that P2P, peer to peer. You're going to be able to go into the blockchain, evaluate who actually owns that property, know the history because it's immutable. Blockchain it cannot be hacked because there's millions of computers holding the same data. And if somebody were to extract one line of data, all the other computers would fill it up immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So now you have trust, you have confidence, and we can exchange based on our cryptocurrency. Let's call it Bitcoin for now. And you send the Bitcoin to the landowner sends the data, you become the owner. Now, what did we just do? We just eliminated banks, title companies, we eliminated real estate brokers, we eliminated lawyers, because in the future you'll be able to have these types of reliable, trustworthy transactions that's going to take place. We have to make sure that our students are understanding that. I've been involved in cryptocurrency for over 10 years. I'm a miner of Bitcoin, and that means that every day as we sit here, I'm making a few pennies here and there mining Bitcoin. That's a whole other discussion, but I would suggest that people go to YouTube and start educating yourself on on everything we're talking about now. Now,
Well, Mike, let me ask you a question, Mike, before you continue down this path. There are those who have heard this future being presented, and they're troubled by the fact that human beings appear to have been taken out of the equation. So you said the doctors are going, the pharmacist is going. So we're putting our very lives in the hands of the chips or the robots or the computers. And we've all seen The Matrix, we've all seen The Terminator, and there's a fear that ultimately, at one point in time in the future, these devices can turn against us. What's the safeguards against that?
That's a good question because artificial intelligence is going to become artificial superintelligence, and this is the disruption part that you're raising. For example, if that chip is actually literally in you, and you're now you become part robot. The term that I've come up with is Robo sapien.
Hmm.
Uh, maybe that maybe that will be the future evolution of the human as we know the human in 100 years. Uh, or one of the challenging moments is what happens if a brain hacker comes along and
Hmm.
hacks your brain and
Hmm.
puts you in a different position, and that's the disruptive side I want people to be nervous about. Uh, I say these things not just to scare folks, but to make people think and
Sure.
to learn and understand. Now, all of this equipment still requires humans to build and maintain. We'll live longer as a result of the technology that's being developed. So there will be all types of emerging. We always need to be entertained with something new and creative. We have to consume food, water. We have to be able to live someplace. There's a variety of things, traditional businesses, but there's going to be an emerging number of many other businesses. Let's go back in time one more time. Henry Ford decided that he had an idea, okay, not an original idea to build automobiles because they were already being built in Europe, but he had he asked his folks back then, what would you like to see in transport? And back then, people would simply say, we need faster horses because they were familiar with this thing called the Model T that was coming along.
Hmm.
Uh, so what would he do then? He built the Model T. Did he really build a new car? Not necessarily. What he did was he built a way in which the cars can be produced faster,
Hmm.
assembly lines.
Hmm.
So when the cotton gin came along and people who were picking cottons had to change, they found that there was a new industry, this industrial age from the agricultural age, that then allowed them to find new opportunities. I submit to you that as we leave the industrial age and as we've moved into the technology age, that there's going to be many, many, many new jobs. Query, are our HBCUs preparing our students?
Hmm.
Can you get a degree in cybersecurity today? Can you get a degree in drone technology, in robotics, in artificial intelligence? You see? Because if we can get one of our HBCUs to become the MIT of the HBC world, they would have an enormous amount of money made available to them by the big companies because they need feeder students as they do with Georgia Tech or MIT or the others. So I've created something called the Roberts Innovation Group. We meet weekly, and I've identified subject matter experts in everything I just described. And what we're doing is preparing curriculum concepts, and we're going to HBCUs with the idea, and as we try to raise money to help support the school to be able to offer a degree, for example, in cybersecurity. Uh, this is something that one of my charitable givebacks, if you will, that I'm interested in seeing as a futurist, knowing that our students have to come up to speed and recognize the opportunities that are currently existing will
Hmm.
exist. And then have all those crazy ideas that you never thought meant anything turn you into becoming a billionaire, maybe even a trillionaire in the future.
Hmm. But let me ask you this, going back to your example with Henry Ford and the Model T, and Ford developing the auto plant, the assembly line. One of your homeboys, Dick Gregory, shared this story years ago, talking about the fact that Ford had frequent meetings and conversations with with George Washington Carver. As a matter of fact, Carver would spend the summers when he wasn't at Tuskegee in Dearborn, Michigan, or wherever Ford lived, and he ultimately built a replica of Washington's house there so that he would feel comfortable. And as Washington was talking about the function of plants and how plants were able to process chlorophyll and what have you to do what they do, it was this idea of the functionality of the plants that led Henry Ford to name the facility where the cars are being assembled an automotive plant. So that tells me that as long as you have wealthy people who have ideas and resources to produce their ideas, there's also the need for innovators and thinkers, people who think outside the box, who are connected to other ways of knowing to merge their talents to produce something that's going to transform the world. I see how that has been happening for decades now, and with this acceleration of cryptocurrency and new ways of generating income, my only concern is making sure that spiritual, that cultural aspect is not lost, and that it can help enhance whatever future businesses are developed. What do you think about that
Oh,
concept?
I think that culture is one of the things that robots can't necessarily create
Hmm.
and sustain. You know, they can maybe look like it, but they can't really um, feel it or understand it as we understand it. You know, it's an algorithm that is sort of placed for it meaning the robot to function within. Um, but let me make this quick perspective for folks who's thinking about things right now. Let's assume that let's go back again to 1900. 1900, you and I made leather buggy whips, okay? And we were talking about the future at that time. And you said to me, well, what do you think about the future of leather buggy whips? And my response may be, well, nothing is ever going to replace the horse and buggy. And you in response say, well, I'm going to convert my leather buggy whip manufacturing company to making leather seats for this new thing called the Model T. You carry the future. And I'm saying that there's plenty of folks who can carry the future now if they can take the time to read, study, and understand, and don't think that whatever their ideas are stupid, because it's those stupid ideas that turn into multi-million dollars. Let
Hmm.
me bring it this way, if I will. If you can eliminate the fear of failure,
Mm.
think of all the things that you can do, folks, things that you've thought about, but you've backed off of. So let's break those two words down for a minute. First word, fear. When you were born, you had no fear. You were perfect. Fear became something that was ingrained in you.
Hmm.
And at the same time that it's ingrained in you, I think you can release it if you put your mind to it.
Hmm.
Fear. Second word, failure. I don't, I never use the word failure, Anthony, because I don't believe in that word. Why don't I believe in it? What do I mean? Every day when you get those 86,400 seconds, there are things that you're doing. You should go out and give it a go. Now, sure, people may end up in divorce, their businesses may not get there. There are a lot of things that go on in life. But my question is that a depressive, are you depressing yourself by saying it's a failure? Or is it nothing more than an experience where the outcome wasn't as you would have liked and you learn from that outcome? So if your mindset is structured to allow you to take all experiences as a tool, as a lesson, then you will be able to succeed in just about anything you do. Now, when I use the word succeed, I mean your own mental capacity to embrace your existence. So maybe the business isn't as you would have liked, maybe it didn't come out the way you wanted, or the marriage or whatever, but you learn from it and learn how to take that data. It's like anything else. You
Hmm.
cannot drive your car by looking in a rearview mirror.
Hmm.
So why would you drive your life like that? You just continue to take a positive approach. And this is what I've taught my children. to have a mindset. If I was in Tuskegee speaking and somebody asked, well, what's more important, to have the adequate money to succeed? I said, well, let's put it this way. What would be more important, to have the adequate money or have money in your business, or to have the mindset to understand who you are and the nature of your business? If the money runs away, you still have the mindset.
Hmm.
That becomes the most important element. Where are your thoughts? Have you eliminated the fear of failure? Do you reckon, and you mentioned something about thinking outside the box. I don't like that term, as you may know, uh,
Uh-huh.
because if you're thinking outside the box, there's a presumption that you are in a box.
Exactly.
And we are not in boxes. We only
Hmm.
have the horizon. We only have the. Now, I know that that's just a term, and I get it. But sometimes words frequently mean a lot to the person who hears those words.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, controlling your mindset, very important. So
Well,
the
well,
elements, I'm sorry.
no, no, no. I mean, I appreciate you um, coming back to me with that term because I was just using it as an expression. I feel the same way as you. There is no box. If you're thinking outside of the box, you're thinking too small. One of the things that I recall from a cousin of mine who graduated from FAMU, who was in the business school, and one of the professors in the School of Business was asked about entrepreneurship, and they said that you can't teach entrepreneurship, that entrepreneurship is an attitude, is a consciousness. And one of the things that I see that's missing from formal education is learning how to develop the proper mindset, learning to understand that there are no boxes and that there is no fear. So if we aren't learning that within our educational institutions, our HBCUs, where can one go to gain that type of information?
Well, first of all, we should have a degree in entrepreneurship available to our students.
Hmm.
We should
I
have a
agree.
be able to get a degree, and that doesn't exist, interestingly enough, in our HBCUs.
Hmm.
So where do we go to get it? We will have to find our way through. I love YouTube. I mean, I know we'll be on YouTube, and so there's so many different ideas and concepts and experiences and TED Talks and things. You know, we have to educate ourselves, but we also need to be associated with success stories. You know, you become a product of your environment. We've heard the old folks say that all the time, and that's true. You know, so if you have to find a mentor, find a mentor. Um, I suggest my reading my books, Action Has No Season and Action Has No Season 2.0, because in it it talks about time management and how to handle a dilemma in business, and financial literacy and the value and importance of that in business. So there's places to go, and that's why I wrote both of my books. One is a philosophical and anecdotal book. The other is a very practical uh, book.
The guidebook, if you will. Hmm.
That's right.
Hmm. And so I assume, Michael, and correct me if I'm wrong, that your reason for writing those books is to demonstrate to others how they can do what you've done, how to walk in your footsteps. Is that correct?
That is correct. It's for my children and
Hmm.
my children's children, and for the greater population. Yes, the greater Black population, to be specific. Uh,
Hmm.
you know, I think everybody has a book in them. Everybody, they have a
Sure.
story. And as you pointed to me when you took me to Egypt, that those writings on the wall are stories. They're talking about culture and history, and they're giving us. And I mean, every wall is replete with, you know, some kind of message that is being left by the ancestors for us. And that's one of the reasons why I think writing books are so very important in getting your story and your message out. Because if you don't get it out,
Yeah,
how
you're lost to
will
time.
anybody know?
Yeah,
You know,
exactly. Well,
we've got,
let me ask you this, Mike. We've got a little less than 10 minutes left, and there's a couple pieces of information, a couple of jewels I'd like for you to share with our listeners. Um, again, the subtitle of your first book, Action Has No Season, is Secrets to Gaining Wealth and Authority. Can you give our listeners three other secrets, that personal secrets that you have utilized in your life to gain wealth and authority?
Well, again, I think, the first one is no real secret, and that is trying to educate yourself as best as you can.
Hmm.
Yes. To push your children and your children's children through example and get knowledge. Now, knowledge can come in different ways, especially in the world of technology.
Sure.
Many of these billionaires never went to college or finished college, right?
Mhm.
So it doesn't mean you need that. But if you are in a position like most of us as Black folks, we don't have a rich Uncle Goldstein that we sit down over dinner and hear the family talk a lot about business every day, almost every once a week or every night. We don't have that. No, we need that. So I want the other secret for us, for my family. What I did was I talked business to my kids. We discussed it. I incorporated them into the decision making. When I was taking companies public, you would my dining room table was full of documents, and they sat there with me and heard, from our closing attorneys the subject matters of each one of those. So giving them exposure is a secret one. And then the last one is lead with love.
Mm.
If you're going to have children, they need to have a parent that loves them and cares for them, and they need to know that they have a place to fall back on, if you will, if things aren't working as they would like, or have somebody to talk to, be able to talk to your parents, so they know that they can call me, and they do, and reach out on a regular basis, either to check on me or they have an interesting question that needs to be answered, or at least get a perspective from their pops that we may be able to approach it this way or that. And then we have fun together. We go fishing. The boys and I, we're out fishing all we'll enjoy sports. And I really implore the value of sports with children. They have to be able to recognize the value of winning and the understanding of losing, which is
Mm.
what sports will do for you. Because in life, you win and sometimes you fall short. Um, so those are the types of secrets that aren't any really big secrets.
Sure.
You're good, healthy, and sports leads to the subject of health, of course. So you're doing the right things to be healthy at the same time.
So, again, if you were to give some advice to a young brother and a young sister
Mhm.
who was just beginning their career, they've got an education,
Okay.
they've engaged in sports, and they have a love for life. So, if you were to give them a 5 or 10 year plan, what thoughts or ideas would you implant in their consciousness in order to ensure their success in this society?
Well, in this society, I still think that it's important to get some actual experience initially. Uh,
Hmm.
for example, if it's the law, if you can join a law firm, kind of almost in a mentoring perspective, just for a year or two, just to see how that works. Um, if you're a physician, you know, try to get in with a hospital or a clinician and try to find ways to learn before you go out and establish your own. Uh, if you are in a family business scenario, then are you contributing something back to the family? And is there something you could do to go out, work, learn, and then bring it back to the family business, which I think is also equally important for family businesses. Uh, there's, we are a global society today.
Hmm.
Like they say, the world is actually flat now. I mean, you can go and do things anywhere. We can be online and we can transact business all over the world. I go back to what I said earlier. Once you're at that point that you just described, and you've got a silly idea, what seems to be a silly idea, don't worry about it being a silly idea because that silly idea may convert into being a multi-billion dollar industry. And we've I cited some examples early in our Zoom discussion of things that just seemed like they were nothing. Somebody living in your house,
Mm-hmm.
you know, now that's Airbnb. Uh,
Exactly.
or you take one like a guy by the name of Smith who got a C in his business plan, and I think it was at Harvard or Yale, and his plan was to fill, just take boxes, load them up, and send them like we had in the U.S. mail, right? But he got a C in it, but he went out and started the business, and it's now called UPS. I'm sorry, it's Federal Express. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. The
Federal,
owner, yeah, the owner of Federal Express just
yeah.
just died last week, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh,
Hmm.
really? No.
Yes.
But the concept is, it was a silly idea just to package up things and put them, you know,
I'm on
uh,
the plane
in
and
your
transport
own
from A to
transport,
B.
right? It didn't
Yeah.
say, well, why would you do that? You got the U.S. Post Office. Well, he did it, and he became a multi-billionaire as a result of it. So
So
that's my only point. There's ideas that you may have that may not seem practical today, that may be extremely applicable, within the next few years.
So, Mike, as we wrap up, Michael Roberts, we're talking to Michael Roberts, businessman, entrepreneur, politician. You describe yourself as an entrepreneur, as a futurist.
Hmm.
What's next for you? What's in your future? You've done a lot. You've built hundreds of businesses. What's next for you? Because I know you're not slowing down.
No, no, no. In fact, I just became chairman of a community development corporation with New Birth Missionary Baptist Church in Atlanta. Uh, uh,
Jamal Bryant, yes,
Paul
sir.
Bryant, I've been on their board for years. In fact, I hired him when he was one of the ones we were going through for interviews as a board member. At the time I was vice chairman of the board. Uh, we're going to build a whole community of affordable homes, and I built many homes and shopping centers. I was the first Black to have actually served and been elected to the International Council of Shopping Centers, which is all the shopping centers in the world, all the bankers, all the developers, all that. And I'm sitting, in a boardroom of 50 people, learning quite a bit. So I'm taking those experiences. I've built homes, I've built shopping centers, I've owned shopping centers, and I'm taking that and I'm putting it into the community there, uh, donating my time to create some affordable homes, some opportunities for multifamily. And one of the things we're even considering is building, check this now, this is, as they would say in church, this is your shout. We're going to build a senior citizens complex for seniors who are raising their grandchildren.
Ah, and they all live within that same development, within that same complex?
Right, try to create an environment where that works. So that's one. And I'm also involved in precious metals and working with a company who's building the first Black uh, dispensary location uh,
Hmm.
in in uh, in Arlington, Texas. I mean, it'll be a Fort Knox type thing. And
Hmm.
he asked me to serve as chairman of the board of his company. So there are, and there's a few more. You say, what's next? Well, to summarize it, I don't believe in retirement. I think that's a crazy, wrong word. Uh,
Hmm.
in simple terms, if we're Homo sapiens, if we're animals like any other animal on the face of the earth, what other animal retires?
For sure, for
If
sure.
if a lion retired tonight, he becomes his brother's breakfast in the morning.
Hmm.
At a point that you are a certain age and you know more than you've ever known, your kids are emancipated, you have probably more than you've ever had. Why not find ways to come up with, take on those other dreams that you have
Sure.
and
Well,
fulfill
there
them?
is an old adage, Michael, that if you find something that you love to do, you never work a day in your life. Well,
Yes,
I can truly say that you have worked hard and quite well at living life and in producing ways of helping other people live a higher quality of life. So you are blessed beyond measure. There's no
thank you.
question about that.
As
So,
are you, brother.
well,
I'm sure
well,
you've done
thank
some
you.
wonderful things to change lives and educate our people and others as to the realities of history. And, there is another statement that, if you don't know your history, you're bound to repeat it. So,
Mhm.
uh, you've put us in positions to think, which is what I like. When I went to Egypt with you and listened to you lecture, I was able to think beyond my existence and go into both the history and the perspective of the future as it relates to Kemet and its history. So that was moving.
Well, thank you so much. And it was an honor being with you being part of our group, sharing this experience with you. And I can't help but feel, brother, that we're moving into a new era. Everything is about to shift to a higher level. And we're
Yeah,
going to need more people like you working along with people like me and taking our community and our people to the next level. We're about to see a dramatic shift in how we've been doing everything. And that shift is going to be, hopefully, that shift will exceed our expectations as to what is possible for human beings to do when they know themselves, when they love themselves, and when they're willing to work together for the betterment of future generations.
I agree. I think Garvey said it many times, just the way you said it. We have to learn how to embrace our own and take full advantage of those opportunities that exist out here.
Thank you so much. My guest today on the Browder File Show has been Michael Roberts, businessman extraordinaire, human being, humanitarian, and it's been wonderful chopping it up with you, brother, for this past hour. And certainly you have an open invitation to come back anytime you have new ideas you want to share with our listeners, new philosophies you want to expound on, new business ideas that you'd like to put out there in the environment. I appreciate having a meaningful conversation with the brother who has a great love of life and is willing to share that love with other souls. So thank you so much, man. It was my honor having you on the show today.
Thank you. You're a wonderful brother, and we appreciate you. Take care.
All right, thank you, brother. Peace. This is it for this edition of the Browder File. I will see you next Wednesday and continue to tune into WPFW for the rest of the afternoon for an evening for some wonderful programs.